Let's bake your first sourdough bread. I will explain you everything you need to know to bake your first sourdough loaf. If you always wanted to start but you don't know where and which utensils you need, this video is exactly for you. So we are talking about which utensils you need, which utensil you don't need, and the step-by-step guidance to start getting your first loaf. So this is day one, it's in the morning, and I would say let's get started because our sourdough starter is already bubbly and ripe. He is ready. Let's dig in what you need. So the first thing, of course, you need a sourdough starter. This video will not explain how to set up a starter, but I will tell you 3 ways how to get one. The first one would be to just create one from scratch, or maybe you have a friend who can give some of her or his starter to you, or you buy one, or you can just ask a bakery to just give you some. So I heard many times that this worked. So these are actually 4 ways. So we are gonna skip that part, but I'm going to have a video about that. We are going to start with the dough. So what you need a kitchen scale which shows you the crumb, because we're gonna have to be very precisely. There is this term of baker's percentages. I don't know if you heard about it, but you will need to just know them. This is super easy. You also need a big bowl depending on how many breads you want to make. I will make 1 loaf in this bowl, which will be totally fine. And then the first step for the day one, the morning, when you have your ripe sourdough starter, we are not going to use it right away. We are going to start with flour. So the first step is autolyse. I don't know if I pronounce it correctly in English, but in Germany it's called Autolyse. And this is simply mixing flour with water. And this helps that the gluten already breaks up and the dough gets smoother, so you can handle it easier. And that's why we are going to incorporate the sourdough starter a little bit later. And now it comes to the baker's percentages. The baker's percentages literally just say which amount of flour, water, salt, and a sourdough starter you need. Now we are only going to use the flour and the water. And the flour is always 100%. And for 1 loaf, you could start with 500 grams of flour. So I'm going to measure that up. Another utensil you need is just something to mix everything up. Another point of the baker's percentages is the water. I don't know if you already heard the term of hydration. So people talk about a 70% hydration loaf or 80%. This means the amount of water. So you want to use between 60 to 80% of water, but in the beginning I would recommend a little bit less hydration because this is just easier to handle, the dough is not so sticky. And my sweet spot, so I found it after years, is like 65%. So 65% of 1,000 grams are 650 milliliters or grams, and we are only having 500 grams of bread. So 65% of 500 grams are 325 grams of water, which we're just going to pour onto the flour. The last part is just stirring. We are going to let that sit for 45 minutes and then we are going to add the starter and the salt. And that's it for the next part. So now you can relax and just wait. 45 minutes are up and we are starting our second step, which is to incorporate the sourdough starter, the ripe sourdough starter, and salt. So another utensil which you need is a big jar. So this jar comprises around 700 milliliters and you really want a big jar because you don't want your levain. So levain means active sourdough starter. This is just a state. It's the same, it's just active. You don't want it to just float out of the jar, which is why I always use a very big jar. And just as a comparison, I do have a video on my Instagram which explains the difference between a sourdough starter and a ripe sourdough starter, which is called levain. 2 utensils, 1 smaller jar, this has around 300 milliliters I guess, and 1 bigger jar for the levain, which you are going to use. The next step is just simply to add your levain to the dough. And when it comes to the amount, again, we have those baker's percentages, and you can use between 10 to 20% of your levain. So again, 10 to 20% of the amount of bread flour or flour. The more levain you will add, the more sour the dough will get, and also the quicker the dough will rise. So when you don't have too much time, you can use just a little more of the starters. I found my sweet spot at 10%, but you can just try what you like the most, how you like your bread like to taste, whatever. And now the salt, it's 2% of the amount of flour, so we're going to have 10 grams. Then we're just going to stir everything up. You can also use your hands. And we are going to wait for 1 hour until the first stretch and fold. So another hour is up, and now we're coming to the first stretch and fold part. The only thing you need for that is a little bit of water. I'm going to wet my fingers or my hand for that. I actually only need 1 hand to do that, and it is super easy. Just go ahead and grab under the dough, and then you just want to grab a piece of it, stretch it a little bit, and fold it over to the other side. And then you're just going to do that in a circle until every part is stretched. So probably 4 to 5 times. Shake that a little bit so it gets loose, and the stretch and fold helps the gluten to build and give that dough a strong structure. We are going to do 4 stretch and folds in total, so this was the first, and the other 3 stretch and folds will take place every other 30 minutes now, not every hour. And you will find that your dough will feel a little bit more cohesive after every stretch and fold you did. We are going to cover that bowl, and then in 30 minutes we're just going to do another round of stretch and folds. Last and final stretch and fold. I already can tell that the dough feels much more cohesive and more like, and more dense. So we did 4 stretch and folds in total, and the next phase is the bulk fermentation. Depending on the temperature in your kitchen, it will take longer or less. I will show you how you can find out whether the dough is done bulk fermentation, but most of the time it will take between 6 to 12 hours depending on the temperature. And now, so what we have here is this little bowl, and we will just let it rest in a warmer place. So the warmer the temperature, the faster the bulk fermentation. So we will check out the dough later, and we're going to let that baby rest and enjoy the rest of our day until this very evening. All right, it's the evening and bulk fermentation is ready. I do have some clues. I can tell when my dough is ready. I know my dough very well, so maybe just for you, I just do a poke test, and if the dough is not too sticky anymore and the spring back isn't too fast, it should be ready. If it's not fully fermented, that's totally alright, because it will sleep in the fridge overnight where it will ferment some more. So if it's over fermented, that's more of a problem, because it's losing its structure and its tightness. So the dough looks kind of like this. So the last part for tonight is to shape the dough into the loaf, for which you will need some flour for dusting, as well as a Benetton, but you do not necessarily need one. You can also just use a regular smaller bowl, and which I can also recommend. This is maybe $1 or something to get the dough out of the bowl, and a bench scraper. I am using rice flour for dusting because it doesn't stick so much, and if you're planning to score with some illustration, for example, maybe not for the beginning, but it's easier. So I already spread a little bit of flour onto the countertop, and I will not use a towel inside. So maybe if you're looking on the internet and these Benettons come with these towel-like inserts, you can use them if your dough is very sticky and you don't risk that the dough will stick to the Benetton or the bowl. I just use some rice flour to generously flour the Benetton so the dough won't stick too much. And now comes the tricky part. So I'm going to remove the dough out of the bowl. You can already see some bubbles. This is always a good sign that your dough is done fermenting. And now you're just going to pull it a little bit apart. There are many techniques to build that final loaf, but I will always go with this one, and it's actually very simple. So the main goal is here to build as much tension as possible. So, which is why you will fold that multiple times. And the tension is very important for the dough to rise in the oven. And now you're going to just pull that, and you are going to flip the dough around a few times. The more you pull that dough towards yourself, the more you will feel that there is some tension. And now what you're just going to do is use your bench scraper. So this utensil comes very handy because the dough will sometimes be very sticky and you can easily just grab under it. You take the dough and gently transfer it into the Benetton. My Benetton is a little bit big for that loaf, so it might be that it loses some tension. So there are different sizes. We are just going to roll with that. And for the seal of the bottom, we are just going to stitch the bottom so the tension is kept within. And last and final part for tonight will just be to cover the bowl and put it in the fridge. And that was the final step for tonight. The next morning we are ready to bake the baby, and I'm very excited. Good morning, it is day 2 and we are ready to get this baby into the oven. So what I did this morning is I preheated the oven to 250 degrees Celsius, which is 480 degrees Fahrenheit, for at least 45 minutes, better, the longer the better, with your Dutch oven inside. So you definitely want to use a Dutch oven in the beginning. So there are ways to bake bread without a Dutch oven, but the Dutch oven really just helps keep the heat. So this is what this bread needs, a lot of heat, and this is why I would totally recommend for a beginner to use a Dutch oven. And they're super cheap options, so 50 euros, dollars, whatever. And yeah, I would say we are ready. I do have another loaf inside, but I'm going to get it out in a minute. So what else? You need a baking paper, or what I like to use is a reusable baking mat. It's super easy and you can always reuse it. You need something to score. There are also different tools. I like to use just this tool where you can pull out the blade because you can work very precisely with that. There are also these wooden utensils, but well, depending on what you want to work on, or if you'd like to do some beautiful scoring, maybe not in the beginning, but later on, I really recommend just using that tool. And you need a really sharp blade. This is a razor blade, and you get really cheap options, but you definitely need something with a razor blade attachment. So we're just going to flip that bread over. Try to be as careful as possible. I keep my hand here and just flip it over. We will have some excess flour. I'm gonna lay it on the kitchen counter, remove that, and I'm just removing the excess flour. So there are endless possibilities to score your loaf. It's just a matter of taste and looks. So I think the easiest way to score a round-shaped loaf is just starting here, just with one strong pull. You want to just score it. You can add some decorations, but you don't need to, it's totally fine. And now we're just going to transfer it into the Dutch oven. You totally need some heat-resistant gloves because it's getting very hot. And now just transfer it. And now we're going to bake for 35 minutes, then we are going to remove the lid, bake for another 10 minutes, and that's it. And here it is, our baby. So, time's up and I'm very happy about it. It cracked a bit, but I think it's still a beauty. I hope I could explain the process quite understandable, and I hope that you're encouraged to try and bake your first sourdough loaf. If you have any questions, let me know and drop them in the comments. I'm happy to answer them. One more thing is you really want to make sure to not cut the loaf immediately, because after baking, it's still baking inside, and you want to wait for, say, at least 30, better 60 minutes to cut. This is the hardest part. Again, I hope you found this video informational, and please be encouraged, just try and bake your first loaf. The chances are high that it won't get done or nicely, whatever, not beautiful. Just do it, repeat, do it again. You will love it. It will be the best bread in your life, your own bread. Also, make sure to follow along on my Instagram channel. I share a lot of sourdough recipes, not only bread, but also pastries, whatever. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to follow for recipes and more Bake With Me videos. Consider subscribing and giving this video a thumbs up if you found some information. Drop in the comments when you're starting your first sourdough journey. And again, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, and I see you in the next video.